The lights of Harmony Point Space Station glowed against the darkness of space like a small city floating among the stars. Ships from dozens of different worlds docked at its many ports. Inside the main conference hall, voices rose and fell as representatives from 3 major powers argued over the fate of a small moon called Kepler-7. Captain Lisa Morgan sat at the head of the long table, her human peacekeeper uniform crisp and clean. She had been doing this job for 8 years now, settling disputes between species that had been fighting long before humans ever left Earth. The moon they were arguing about held rare crystals that both the Elven Silverleaf Coalition and the Zentari Empire wanted to mine. Commander Arya Nightweave stood near the large viewing window, her tall elven frame casting a long shadow across the floor. Her silver hair fell to her shoulders, and her green eyes held the cold look of someone who had lived for over 300 years. She wore the dark blue uniform of the elven military with gold trim that showed her high rank. To her, this meeting was a waste of time. Elves had claimed that moon first, and no short-lived human should have the power to say otherwise. Dr. Zara Vex sat quietly at the far end of the table, her purple skin and 4 arms marking her as a member of the Zentari Empire. She was here, as an observer, recording everything for her government back home. Her large black eyes missed nothing as she watched the tension build between the human and the elf. Lisa looked down at her datapad and cleared her throat. The room fell silent. She had spent 3 days reviewing mining rights, territorial claims, and galactic law. The answer was clear, even if it would not make everyone happy. After careful review of all evidence and claims, Lisa began, her voice steady and professional. I find that the Zentari Empire has the stronger legal claim to mining rights on Kepler-7. The Elven survey was conducted without proper documentation, and their claim was filed after the Zentari had already established a research outpost on the moon. Arya's face turned red with anger, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "This is outrageous," she said, her voice rising. "My people have been sailing the stars when humans were still crawling in mud on their little planet. We do not need permission from a child species to claim what is rightfully ours." Lisa remained calm. She had heard such insults before. Many of the older species looked down on humans as newcomers to galactic politics. "The law is clear, Commander Nightweave. Age of a species does not grant special privileges under current galactic agreements." Arya stepped forward, her hand moving to the ceremonial sword at her side. "You dare lecture me about law? You humans know nothing of honor or tradition. Your kind thinks everything can be solved with papers and meetings." The other delegates in the room shifted uncomfortably. Dr. Zara Vex leaned forward slightly, her recording devices capturing every word and gesture. "I challenge you to an honor duel," Arya announced, drawing gasps from several representatives. "If you truly believe in your decision, prove it with blade and courage. Unless, of course, you are too weak and cowardly like the rest of your species." The room fell completely silent. An honor duel was an ancient elven tradition, rarely invoked in modern times. By galactic law, Lisa had the right to refuse, but doing so would be seen as weakness. It would undermine human authority in future negotiations. Lisa stood up slowly, her blue eyes meeting Arya's green ones without flinching. "I accept your challenge, Commander Nightweave." Several delegates tried to protest, but Lisa raised her hand for silence. "The duel will be conducted according to traditional elven rules. Bladed weapons only, first blood or yield." Arya smiled coldly. She had expected the human to back down. Now she would show everyone just how weak these newcomers really were. "Excellent. We shall see what human courage is truly worth." The conference hall was quickly cleared and rearranged. A circular area was marked off for combat. Arya selected 2 identical elven ceremonial swords from a display case, handing one to Lisa. The blade was lighter than Lisa had expected, with a slight curve and razor-sharp edge. Dr. Zara Vex positioned herself where she could record everything, clearly. She had a feeling this moment would be important for reasons beyond the immediate dispute. The 2 women faced each other in the center of the circle. Arya moved with the fluid grace of centuries of training. She had fought dozens of duels and never lost. Lisa held her sword awkwardly at first, then seemed to find her balance. "Begin." announced the senior Zentari delegate. Arya attacked immediately, her blade whistling through the air in a series of precise strikes. She expected to end this quickly with a shallow cut that would prove her point without seriously injuring the human. But Lisa was not where Arya expected her to be. The human had stepped aside and brought her own blade up in a defensive position that caught Arya's sword and turned it away. Lisa's movements were not graceful like an elf's, but they were practical and effective. For several minutes, the two women circled each other, trading strikes and parries. Arya began to realize that while Lisa lacked formal training, she had real combat experience. The human fought like someone who had been in life-and-death situations before. A thin line of blood appeared on Arya's cheek where Lisa's blade had grazed her. The elf's eyes widened in shock and fury. No human should be able to touch her, let alone draw first blood. Rage clouded Arya's judgment. She reached for the small plasma pistol hidden in her boot, the one that was definitely not allowed in an honor duel. Her pride could not accept losing to what she saw as an inferior species. "Arya, no," Dr. Zara Vex called out. But it was too late. The plasma bolt hit Lisa in the chest, throwing her backwards. She hit the floor hard and did not move again. The smell of burned flesh filled the air. The room erupted in chaos. Delegates shouted in their native languages. Security guards rushed forward. But Dr. Zara Vex just sat quietly, her recording devices still running, knowing that everything had just changed forever. Arya stood over Lisa's body, the smoking plasma pistol still in her hand. She had won, but as she looked around at the horrified faces surrounding her, she began to understand that her victory might have cost her people everything. The news traveled faster than any starship could fly. Within hours, every human colony, every human ship, and every human outpost in the galaxy had seen the recording. Dr. Zara Vex had uploaded it to the Galactic Communication Network before. Anyone could stop her. The footage was clear and damning. A human peacekeeper, fighting honorably in a duel she had been winning, murdered in cold blood by an elf who could not accept defeat. Admiral Kate Sullivan was eating breakfast in her quarters, aboard the battleship Titan when the emergency alert came through. She was a woman in her 50s, with short gray hair and sharp brown eyes that had seen too many battles. The message marked urgent from Earth Command made her coffee grow cold as she watched the footage 3 times. She had known Lisa Morgan personally. They had served together during the Outer Rim conflicts 5 years ago. Lisa had been brave, fair, and dedicated to keeping peace between species that seemed determined to fight each other. Now she was dead because an elf could not handle losing a fair fight. Kate's communication panel lit up with incoming messages. Colony governors demanding action, ship captains asking for orders, trade union leaders reporting that their workers were walking off jobs at alien-owned facilities. The footage had not just angered the military, it had angered every human in the galaxy. On the elven homeworld of Silverleaf, Princess Lyra Starwind paced in her crystal palace, overlooking the capital city. She was younger than most elven nobles, only 200 years old, with long golden hair and violet eyes. Unlike many of her people, she understood that the galaxy had changed since humans had joined the community of worlds. The princess called an emergency session of the Coalition Council, but the older elves seemed unconcerned. Lord Commander Theron, who was over 800 years old, waved dismissively when Lyra showed him the footage. "One dead human," he said with a shrug. "Regrettable, but hardly worth concerning ourselves over. Arya was defending elven honor against an upstart species. Perhaps this will teach them their proper place." Princess Lyra stared at him in disbelief. "You do not understand what you are seeing. The humans will not let this pass. They cannot let this pass." But the old elf just laughed. "What can they do? They are a young species with short lives. They lack the patience for real warfare. They will complain loudly for a few months, then find something else to occupy their brief attention spans." Meanwhile, throughout human space, something unprecedented was happening. Earth had not issued any official orders yet, but human ships began converging on rally points anyway. Merchant captains abandoned profitable trade routes to join growing fleets. Colonial militias activated without being asked. Even civilian ships loaded with supplies headed toward military gathering points. Dr. Zara Vex found herself in an uncomfortable position. As the one who had released the footage, she was being praised by humans and condemned by elves. She had not expected the reaction to be so swift and intense. In her laboratory, aboard Harmony Point, she began analyzing human communication patterns and troop movements. What she discovered frightened her. Humans were not just angry. They were organizing with a speed and efficiency that her advanced algorithms could barely track. Supply chains that normally moved trade goods were now moving weapons and military equipment. Factories that built civilian products had retooled overnight to produce military hardware. It was as if the entire human species had become a single military organism. Back on Earth, emergency sessions of the Global Council ran day and night. General Maya Cross, the head of Terran Marine Command, stood before a room full of officials and military leaders. She was a tall woman with dark skin and silver hair, known for her strategic mind and unwavering determination. "The elves think, we will complain and then forget," Maya said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "They are wrong. Captain Morgan was not just a peacekeeper. She was a symbol of everything we stand for in this galaxy. If we allow her murder to go unanswered, every human serving in space becomes a target." The vote was unanimous. Earth would respond, and the response would be proportional to the crime. Admiral Sullivan received her new orders while reviewing fleet positions. She was to take command of the largest human naval force ever assembled and proceed to Elven space. But this was not to be a simple military action. Earth was sending a message that would reshape galactic politics forever. Within days, over 300 human warships had gathered at the edge of Elven territory, but more were coming. Earth's orbital shipyards, normally busy with civilian contracts, had switched to producing military vessels around the clock. The industrial capacity that had made humans valuable trading partners was now being turned toward war production. Princess Lyra watched the human fleet grow larger each day and felt sick to her stomach. She tried repeatedly to contact Admiral Sullivan directly, but her messages were politely declined. The humans were following proper diplomatic channels, which meant any communication had to go through official Elven government representatives. The same representatives who still insisted humans were not a serious threat. Commander Arya Nightweave had returned to the Elven homeworld expecting to be celebrated as a hero. Instead, she found herself isolated in her quarters while the Coalition Council debated what to do with her. Some wanted to promote her for defending Elven honor. Others wanted to quietly transfer her to a distant posting until the controversy died down. None of them seemed to understand that the controversy would not die down. Dr. Zarevex published a preliminary analysis of human military mobilization that sent shockwaves through the galactic intelligence community. According to her calculations, humans could field a fleet larger than any other single species within 6 months. More concerning, they showed signs of being able to sustain that level of military production indefinitely. The Zentari Empire, which had been preparing to celebrate their mining rights victory, suddenly found themselves watching nervously as human forces massed near their borders, too. It seemed the humans viewed anyone who had been present during Captain Morgan's murder as potentially complicit. On Earth, ordinary citizens lined up at recruitment centers. The volunteer rate was so high that the military had to turn people away. Children in schools held memorial services for a peacekeeper most of them had never heard of, but who had become a symbol of human values under attack. The footage played endlessly on human news networks. Each viewing made the crimes seem more heinous. A woman doing her job, trying to keep peace between warring species, murdered because she had the audacity to be better at fighting than her killer expected. Admiral Sullivan stood on the bridge of her flagship, looking out at the growing human fleet through the transparent aluminum windows. Each ship represented not just military power, but the collective will of humanity to see justice done. The elves had made a fundamental error in their understanding of human nature. They thought killing one human would be forgotten. They had no idea that killing one human would awaken all the rest, Princess. Lyra made one last, desperate attempt to reach out to human leadership, sending a personal message to Admiral Sullivan through back channels. In it, she offered to personally deliver Commander Arya for trial and punishment. The response came back. Within an hour. Brief and formal. The time for simple solutions has passed. Admiral Sullivan, Terran Defense Force. The princess stared at the message for a long time. then walked to her window overlooking the capital city. In the distance, she could see the lights of elven warships preparing for battle. They still thought this would be a conventional conflict between military forces. They had no idea they were about to face the full industrial and military might of an entire species that had decided their honor was at stake. Admiral Kate Sullivan's fleet had grown beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. 800 ships now hung in space at the edge of elven territory, and more arrived every day. The vessels ranged from massive battleships to smaller destroyers. But what impressed observers most was how perfectly they moved together. When the Admiral gave an order, 800 ships responded as one. Dr. Zara Vex had requested permission to observe the human fleet, claiming scientific interest. In truth, she felt responsible for what was happening and wanted to understand the forces she had helped unleash. As her small research vessel approached the human formation, she was amazed by what she saw. The ships were not just waiting in space. They were constantly moving, practicing maneuvers, running exercises. Supply vessels moved between the warships like busy insects, keeping every ship fully stocked with weapons, fuel, and food. It was obvious these humans were not planning a quick battle. They were preparing for a long campaign. Back on the Elven homeworld, the Coalition Council finally began to take the human threat seriously. Lord Commander Theron stood before a tactical display showing the enemy fleet and shook his head in disbelief. "How did they build so many ships so quickly?" he asked his military advisors. "They did not build them all recently," replied General Valeth, a female elf with centuries of military experience. "Our intelligence shows they have been converting civilian vessels to military use. Cargo ships fitted with weapons. Passenger liners turned into troop transports. Mining vessels equipped with military sensors. It appears humans designed their civilian ships to be easily converted for war." Princess Lyra studied the reports with growing alarm. The humans had not just assembled a fleet. They had transformed their entire civilization into a war machine. Factories that normally built household goods were now producing ammunition. Civilian communication networks had been converted to military command systems. Even human children were collecting scrap metal for the war effort. "They are not fighting like any species we have encountered before," she told the council. "This is not about territory or resources. They are fighting for principle, and they have involved their entire population in the effort." But the older elves remained confident. They had superior technology, longer lifespans, and more combat experience. How could a species that had only been in space for a few hundred years hope to defeat people who had been fighting wars for millennia? They were about to find out. General Maya Cross stood in the briefing room of her assault ship, surrounded by holographic displays showing 3 elven border worlds. These planets were lightly defended, chosen specifically because they could be taken without massive casualties. The general was not interested in slaughtering elven civilians. She wanted to send a message. "The operation will begin simultaneously on all 3 worlds," she told her officers. "We drop exactly at local noon on each planet. Maximum visibility, full news coverage. The elves need to see what human military precision looks like." The landings were executed flawlessly. On the elven world of Moonhaven, 10,000 human marines landed in the capital city's central plaza within a span of 15 minutes. They moved with mechanical precision, securing key points, while civilian elves watched in stunned silence. General Cross herself led the landing on Starfall, the most heavily defended of the 3 worlds. The elven garrison tried to resist, but they were overwhelmed before they could mount an effective defense. Human dropships landed faster than elven sensors could track them. Marine units appeared simultaneously at dozens of locations across the planet. The most shocking aspect was not the speed of the landings, but what happened afterward. The humans did not occupy the planets in the traditional sense. They set up defensive positions around government buildings and communication centers, but left civilian areas untouched. Elven citizens could go about their daily lives normally, but their governments could not function. Dr. Zara Vex watched the news coverage from her position with the human fleet and felt her understanding of warfare changing. The humans had not conquered these worlds. They had simply demonstrated that they could conquer them whenever they chose. It was a show of strength designed to terrify rather than destroy. On Silverleaf, the elven homeworld, panic began to set in. If the humans could take 3 border worlds simultaneously without breaking stride, What was to stop them from taking any elven world they chose? Commander Arya Nightweave sat in her quarters, finally understanding what she had done. The reports flowing in made it clear that humanity was not responding to the death of one Peacekeeper. They were responding to an attack on everything they believed in. She had not just killed Lisa Morgan. She had challenged the idea that human law and human principles meant anything in the galaxy. Princess Lyra made an emergency broadcast to both human and elven populations, offering herself as a hostage to guarantee good faith negotiations. The human response came from Admiral Sullivan personally. Princess Lyra Starwind is not responsible for the crime committed against Captain Morgan. However, she is welcome to travel to our fleet under guarantee of safe passage if she wishes to discuss terms. The princess accepted immediately, despite strong opposition from the Coalition Council. She traveled alone to the human fleet in a small diplomatic vessel, accompanied only by her personal guard captain. Admiral Sullivan received her in the main conference room of her flagship. The human admiral was shorter than most elves, but her presence filled the room. Princess Lyra had expected to meet with a warrior. Instead, she found herself facing someone who reminded her more of a teacher or judge. "Your Highness," Admiral Sullivan said formally, "I appreciate your courage in coming here. However, I must be clear about the situation. The Terran Federation is not interested in negotiations that preserve the status quo. Your people have demonstrated that they view human law and human authority as meaningless. That cannot be allowed to continue." Princess Lyra struggled to find the right words. "Admiral, surely we can find a solution that does not require further bloodshed." Commander Arya acted without authorization. The coalition government is willing to punish her appropriately. "Appropriately according to whom?" Admiral Sullivan asked. "Elven justice? The same system that produced someone who thought murder was an acceptable response to losing a fair fight? No, Your Highness. Commander Arya will face trial under human law for the murder of a human citizen, and the Elven government will guarantee that no similar incident ever occurs again." The princess felt cold fear in her stomach. "What exactly are you demanding?" Admiral Sullivan activated a holographic display showing the current military situation. Human fleets were positioned throughout the galaxy, not just near Elven space. Trade routes that had been dominated by Elven merchants for centuries were now controlled by human ships. "We are demanding a new relationship between our species," the Admiral said calmly. "One based on mutual respect rather than Elven condescension. Your people will acknowledge human authority in human-administered space. Elven military personnel will submit to human oversight when operating in neutral territories. And most importantly, the galaxy will understand that attacking a human representative means war with all of humanity." Princess Lyra stared at the display, seeing the full scope of human preparation. This was not about revenge for one death. This was about reshaping the entire balance of power in the galaxy. "And if we refuse?" she asked quietly. Admiral Sullivan's expression did not change. "Then we will continue taking Elven worlds until you see reason. We have identified 47 Elven colonies that can be occupied with minimal casualties. Our industrial capacity allows us to maintain military operations indefinitely. The question is, how much of your civilization you are willing to sacrifice to preserve your pride?" The princess understood now why the human fleet kept growing instead of attacking. They were not preparing for one battle. They were preparing to fight for as long as necessary to achieve their goals. Dr. Zara Vex, monitoring the meeting from her research ship, realized she was witnessing the end of the old galactic order. The humans had not just assembled a fleet. They had assembled the means to enforce their will on any species that challenged them, and they were just getting started. The Elven Coalition Council rejected Admiral Sullivan's demands in a vote of 8-2. Lord Commander Theron stood before the assembled nobles and declared that no inferior species would dictate terms to the proud Elven people. Princess Lyra was one of only 2 voices calling for acceptance of human terms, but her warnings were dismissed as cowardice. "We have faced greater threats than angry humans," Theron announced, to cheers from the other council members. "Our technology is superior, our warriors more skilled, our experience measured in millennia rather than decades. If they want war, we shall give them a war they will never forget." The Elven military began mobilizing their home fleet, calling in ships from across their territory. Within days, over 400 elven warships had assembled near Silverleaf. Their vessels were sleek and beautiful, powered by advanced fusion drives and armed with plasma weapons that could slice through most armor like it was paper. Admiral Sullivan watched the elven fleet form up and felt no satisfaction at the sight. She had hoped the elves would see reason and avoid unnecessary bloodshed, but their pride would not allow them to back down from what they saw as a challenge to their superiority. Dr. Zara Vex positioned her research vessel at a safe distance to observe what would likely be the largest space battle in galactic history. Her instruments detected energy signatures from both fleets as they prepared for combat. On paper, the forces seemed evenly matched. In reality, she suspected the numbers would prove misleading. The first battle took place near the mining world of Kepler-7, the same moon that had started this entire conflict. Lord Commander Theron led the elven fleet personally, confident that a quick victory would force the humans to retreat and accept elven dominance. The elves attacked in traditional formation, their ships moving in elegant patterns that had been perfected over centuries of warfare. Their plasma cannons lit up space with brilliant colors as they engaged the human fleet at long range. But something was wrong. The human ships did not respond as the elves expected. Instead of elegant maneuvers and individual ship duels, the humans fought as a single entity. When elven ships targeted what appeared to be weak points in the human formation, they found themselves surrounded by coordinated fire from multiple directions. Human tactics were brutally efficient rather than beautiful. They used numerical superiority and superior coordination to isolate elven ships and destroy them one by one. When an elven captain tried to engage in single combat with a human vessel, 3 other human ships would appear to support their ally. Within 2 hours, the elven fleet was retreating with heavy losses. Lord Commander Theron's flagship was among the vessels limping back to elven space, its hull scarred by human weapons. But the humans did not pursue. Instead, they began landing troops on Kepler-7 itself. General Maya Cross led the planetary assault with the same precision she had shown on the border worlds. Human Marines landed at key points across the moon and secured all mining facilities within 6 hours. The operation was broadcast live to news networks across the galaxy. "This is what happens when you kill a human peacekeeper," General Cross announced to the cameras as elven facilities burned in the background. "We do not seek to destroy your people, but we will not allow our own people to be murdered without consequence." Back on Silverleaf, the elven leadership finally began to understand what they were facing. The humans did not fight for glory or honor. They fought to win, and they were very good at it. Commander Arya Nightweave watched the news coverage from her quarters and felt the weight of responsibility crushing down on her. Every elven ship destroyed, every elven world occupied, every elven life lost, all because she could not accept losing a fair fight to a human. She requested an audience with Princess Lyra, who had become the unofficial leader of the peace faction among the elves. "I want to surrender myself to human justice," Arya told the princess. "Perhaps if I face trial for my crime, this war can end before more people die." Princess Lyra shook her head sadly. "It is too late for simple gestures, Arya. The humans are not just angry about your crime anymore. They are reshaping the galaxy to ensure such a crime can never happen again." The fighting continued for weeks. Human forces advanced steadily through elven space, not conquering planets but demonstrating their ability to strike anywhere they chose. Elven military bases found themselves surrounded overnight by human troops who seemed to appear from nowhere. Elven supply lines were cut by human ships that moved faster and struck harder than anything the elves had expected. Dr. Zara Vex documented each battle, watching in fascination as human military doctrine evolved in real time. The humans learned from every engagement, adapting their tactics to exploit elven weaknesses. More importantly, they seemed to have unlimited supplies and reinforcements. The key to human success became clear during the battle for the elven stronghold of Nova Sanctum. The elves had fortified this system with overlapping defensive stations and multiple fleet groups. It should have been impregnable. The humans did not attack it directly. Instead, they attacked the supply convoys that kept Nova Sanctum operational. Within days, the mighty fortress found itself running low on food, ammunition, and spare parts. The elven defenders were forced to abandon their positions not because they were defeated in battle, but because they could no longer sustain their defense. Admiral Sullivan watched the evacuation of Nova Sanctum from her command ship and allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The humans were winning not through superior individual skill, but through superior logistics and planning. It was a very human way to fight. Princess Lyra made one last desperate attempt to rally elven resistance, calling for unity among the scattered colony worlds. But many elven planets had already declared neutrality, unwilling to face human occupation for the sake of maintaining coalition pride. The final blow came when the Zentari Empire and 3 other major powers issued a joint statement calling for elven surrender. They had watched human military capabilities with growing alarm and decided they wanted no part of a conflict with Earth. Dr. Zara Vex published her analysis of human industrial capacity during the war, and the numbers terrified galactic leaders. The humans had increased their military production by over 300% in just 2 months. More concerning, they showed no signs of strain from the effort. Earth's economy had simply shifted into wartime mode as if it had been designed for exactly this purpose. Commander Arya sat in her quarters on Silverleaf as human ships appeared in orbit around the elven homeworld itself. The war was over, and her people had lost completely. The coalition council that had voted for war was preparing to flee to distant colonies, leaving the princess to negotiate surrender terms. As human marines landed in the capital city below, Arya finally understood the true cost of her moment of pride. She had not just killed Lisa Morgan, she had destroyed the old galactic order where elven superiority was taken for granted. The humans had proven that in the new galaxy, respect was earned through competence and strength, not age and tradition. And they were very good at earning respect. Princess Lyra Starwind stood in the same conference hall on Harmony Point, where Captain Lisa Morgan had been murdered 3 months earlier. This time, she was signing documents that would reshape the relationship between humans and elves forever. Admiral Kate Sullivan sat across from her, no longer in military uniform, but wearing the formal dress of a diplomatic representative. The treaty was not as harsh as it could have been, but it was complete. Commander Arya Nightweave would be transported to Earth to face trial for murder under human law. Elven military forces would be reduced by half and placed under joint human-elven command. Most importantly, humans would have equal status with elves in all galactic institutions, ending centuries of elven dominance in interstellar politics. Dr. Zara Vex watched the signing ceremony and felt a mixture of relief and amazement. The war had ended not with the destruction of the elven people, but with their integration into a new galactic order where humans could no longer be dismissed as junior partners. Commander Arya was brought to the ceremony in restraints, flanked by human guards. She looked older than her 300 years, the weight of responsibility for her people's defeat visible in every line of her face. When Princess Lyra asked if she had any final words before being taken to Earth, Arya spoke quietly but clearly. "I killed Lisa Morgan because I could not accept that a human might be my equal," she said. "I was wrong. Humans are not our equals. In the ways that matter most, they are our superiors." The transport ship that carried Arya to Earth was accompanied by news crews from across the galaxy. Her trial would be broadcast live, serving as a reminder of what happened to those who harmed human representatives. But Arya had requested the coverage herself, wanting her people to see her accept responsibility for her actions. On Earth, Arya was housed in a minimum security facility while awaiting trial. She had expected harsh treatment, but the humans were scrupulously fair. She was provided with legal representation, access to elven cultural materials, and regular communication with her family. The contrast with how elves typically treated prisoners of war was not lost on observers. The trial lasted 2 weeks and was conducted with careful attention to both human law and galactic legal traditions. Arya pleaded guilty to all charges and made a detailed confession describing her motivations and actions. When asked why she had chosen to face human justice rather than flee, her answer surprised many. "Because Captain Morgan deserved justice," Arya said, "and because my people needed to see that actions have consequences, regardless of who commits them." The judge sentenced Arya to life imprisonment with possibility of parole after 25 years. She would serve her time on a human colony world, working in community service programs while living under supervision. It was a harsh sentence by elven standards, but fair by human ones. Princess Lyra had remained on Earth during the trial, serving as an unofficial ambassador between the two species. She spent her time learning about human culture and government, trying to understand the people who had defeated her civilization so thoroughly. What she discovered changed her perspective completely. Humans did not see the war as a victory over the elves. They saw it as a necessary correction to a system that had allowed injustice to flourish. Admiral Sullivan explained it to her one evening as they walked through the gardens of the United Nations building in New York. "We did not want to conquer your people, Princess," the Admiral said. "We wanted to ensure that no human would ever again be murdered simply for doing their job. The scope of our response was proportional to the threat we perceived." "Incess." Lyra struggled to understand. "But surely you could have achieved your goals without such massive military action?" Admiral Sullivan stopped walking and looked up at the stars visible above the city lights. "Could we? Your people dismissed us as weak and unworthy of respect. They needed to see our true capabilities, not just for our sake, but for the sake of peace. Now, when humans speak, other species listen. That makes everyone safer." Dr. Zara Vex published her complete analysis of the human-elven conflict 6 months after its conclusion. The document became required reading in diplomatic academies across the galaxy. Her central thesis was that humans fought wars differently than any other known species, viewing conflict as a tool of policy rather than a test of individual courage. "Humans do not seek to defeat their enemies," she wrote. "They seek to convince their enemies that resistance is futile. This approach requires massive displays of capability rather than simply winning battles. The humans demonstrated that they could have destroyed the elven civilization entirely, but chose justice instead. This restraint makes them more dangerous, not less, because it shows they fight from principle rather than passion." Admiral Sullivan was promoted to head the new Terran Galactic Defense Force, an organization that would coordinate human military activities across known space. Her first official act was to establish the Lisa Morgan Peacekeeping Academy, where representatives from all species could learn advanced conflict resolution techniques. Princess Lyra became the first non-human instructor at the academy, teaching courses on interspecies diplomacy and cultural understanding. She had requested the position personally, wanting to help prevent future conflicts through education rather than military force. General Maya Cross retired from active military service and wrote a comprehensive manual on human military doctrine that was immediately classified by most galactic governments. The parts that were made public became the foundation for a new generation of military thinking focused on logistics, coordination, and industrial capacity rather than individual heroics. Commander Arya served her sentence quietly, working in agricultural programs that helped feed refugees from various conflicts across the galaxy. She rarely spoke to journalists, but when she did, her message was always the same. Pride and prejudice had consequences, and those consequences could reshape entire civilizations. The memorial service for Captain Lisa Morgan was held 1 year after her death. On the anniversary of the day, Harmony Point was rededicated as an interspecies peacekeeping center. Representatives from dozens of worlds attended, including Admiral Sullivan, Princess Lyra, and Dr. Zara Vex. A holographic recording of Commander Arya speaking from her prison on the agricultural world of New Harvest was played during the ceremony. She stood in a simple work uniform, her hands dirty from the soil, and spoke directly to the camera. "Lisa Morgan died because I could not accept that my assumptions about humans were wrong," she said. "She died because I valued my pride more than justice. I hope that by facing the consequences of my actions, I can help ensure that no one else makes the same mistake." The ceremony concluded with the unveiling of a new statue in Harmony Point's Central Plaza. It showed Captain Lisa Morgan not in military uniform, but in her peacekeeper's robes, holding a set of scales that represented justice. The inscription read simply, "To those who serve justice, regardless of species." Admiral Sullivan spoke briefly. At the unveiling, her words carried live to human colonies across the galaxy. Captain Morgan believed that justice was universal, that right and wrong transcended species boundaries. Her death proved that some principles are worth fighting for, no matter the cost. Dr. Zara Vex stood at the back of the crowd thinking about how much had changed in 1 year. The galaxy was safer now, but also more complex. Humans were no longer the junior partners in galactic politics. They were the species that other worlds looked to for protection and leadership. Princess. Lyra watched human children playing in the plaza below the memorial and felt hope for the future. These children would grow up in a galaxy where species were judged by their actions rather than their age or assumed superiority. It was Lisa Morgan's true legacy, bought with her life, but secured by her people's determination to see justice done. As the ceremony ended and the crowds dispersed, the lights of Harmony Point continued to shine against the darkness of space. But now they represented something new, not just a place where different species could meet, but a place where they could meet as equals under a system of justice that applied to everyone. It was a better galaxy than the one Lisa Morgan had died in, and her people had made sure of that.